The warm breeze of late spring rustled through the trees as Robert Withington stepped out of his truck, stretching his arms after a long day of work. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a few scattered vehicles and the distant hum of traffic. It was one of those quiet afternoons in Trumbull, Connecticut, where nothing particularly exciting ever seemed to happen. But that was about to change. Withington had just stopped by a local store to pick up a few supplies before heading home. He wasn't in any rush. Life had been steady. His dog training business kept him occupied, and he enjoyed the simple rhythm of his routine. As he walked across the lot, his foot almost brushed against something. A dark-colored bag, slightly worn, lay on the pavement near the curb. Curious, he bent down and picked it up. It was heavier than he expected. His pulse quickened slightly as he unzipped it. Inside, crisp bills stacked neatly in bundles gleamed in the late afternoon light. His breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just a few forgotten dollars. It was a small fortune. He glanced around. The lot was empty. No one seemed to be frantically searching for anything. No cars were parked nearby, no voices in the distance calling out for lost belongings. For a long moment, he stood there, staring at the money. His mind raced. What were the chances? Just a normal day, and here, out of nowhere, was a bag of cash. He had read about things like this happening in stories, but he never thought he'd be in one himself. His fingers tightened around the bag's handle. What should he do? His first instinct was to look inside for some kind of identification. As he rifled through the contents, he noticed a few envelopes, some receipts, and something else. A logo, a bank's insignia, faint but unmistakable. His heartbeat drummed in his ears. Who would leave this here? Was it some kind of test? A trap? He took a deep breath and looked around once more. Still, no one. Robert wasn't a criminal. He had lived in Trumbull for years, ran an honest business, and was well liked in his community. He had never stolen a thing in his life. But this was different. A thought crept into his mind. Finders keepers, right? He zipped the bag shut, and, with one last glance over his shoulder, walked briskly back to his truck. His hands trembled as he placed the bag on the passenger seat. He could almost feel the weight of what he had just done settling in. His heart pounded, but alongside the rush of nerves, there was something else. Excitement. This wasn't just any day. This was a day he would never forget. Robert Withington gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual as he drove away from the parking lot. His thoughts raced as fast as the passing streetlights. The bag sat beside him on the passenger seat, an undeniable presence that made his heart thump louder with every turn of the tires. He couldn't ignore it. Nearly $5,000 in cash. Just sitting there, waiting. As he pulled into his driveway, he hesitated before turning off the engine. His modest home sat in the quiet neighborhood like it always had, unchanged. But something about it felt different now. He felt different now. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed the bag and stepped inside. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. He set the bag on the dining table, staring at it as if it might disappear at any moment. His mind battled itself. This could change things. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to ease some burdens. Bills, repairs, maybe even some upgrades to his dog training business. A little financial breathing room he hadn't expected. But was it right? He ran his fingers through his short graying hair, pacing back and forth. He hadn't done anything wrong, had he? The bag had been abandoned. No one was around. There was no ID, no phone number, no way to know who had lost it. And yet, something gnawed at him. To distract himself, he flicked on the TV. The news anchor droned about politics, the weather, and local events. Nothing about missing money. He exhaled sharply. Maybe this was just a lucky break. Maybe no one even realized it was gone yet. But what if they did? What if someone was desperately searching for it right now? What if this wasn't just cash? What if it belonged to a business, or worse, someone's life savings? His stomach twisted. He unzipped the bag again, this time going through its contents more carefully. The bills were bundled neatly, but it wasn't just money inside. There were papers, documents, receipts, official-looking forms. And then he saw it. A bank logo. The knot in his gut tightened. This wasn't just some random lost bag. This belonged to a business, maybe even a government office. His pulse quickened. He had made a mistake, hadn't he? For the first time that night, fear crept in. He shut the bag, pushing it away from him like it carried some kind of curse. His thoughts spiraled. Was this a crime? Could he get in trouble? Number. No one knew he had it. It was just between him and fate. He could still make a decision. But as the clock struck midnight and the house remained eerily silent, Robert Withington realized something unsettling. This wasn't a lucky break. This was a choice. And whatever he decided to do next, there would be no turning back. Sleep did not come easy that night. Robert Withington lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the dim glow of his alarm clock marking the slow creep of time. His mind refused to quiet. The bag sat downstairs like a silent presence, a heavy reminder of the crossroads he now stood at. Every time he closed his eyes, the same thoughts replayed. What if someone was searching for it? What if the police got involved? But another voice in his head countered. If they didn't find it right away, maybe they never would. People lose things all the time. Money disappears. Maybe this time it was meant for him. By morning, exhaustion clung to him, but something else had settled in. Resolve. He had convinced himself that he hadn't stolen anything. He had found it. It wasn't his fault someone had left it behind. That was their problem, not his. With that thought firm in his mind, he decided to go about his day as usual. He brewed his coffee, took his dog out for a walk, and tried to keep things normal. But nothing felt normal. Every car that passed by made him tense. Every glance from a neighbor felt like suspicion. Still, by mid-morning, no police, no news reports, no one knocking on his door. Maybe, just maybe, he had gotten away with it. Later that day, Robert decided to stop by a local diner for lunch. Sitting at the counter, sipping on his coffee, he overheard a conversation that sent chills down his spine. Two men in business attire sat a few stools away, speaking in hushed tones. "I still can't believe it," one of them muttered, shaking his head. "The guy just dropped it? Right outside the bank?" Robert froze. "Yeah," the other man said. "Town employee, been working there for years. He swears it was an accident, but the money just vanished. They've got people looking into it, checking security cameras, but so far, nothing." Robert's stomach twisted. His hands tightened around his coffee mug. They were looking for it. For a split second, he considered jumping in, playing dumb, maybe fishing for more details. But he stopped himself. Anything he said could make him a suspect. He needed to leave. Placing a few bills on the counter, he got up and walked out, his pulse pounding in his ears. The moment he stepped outside, the sun felt too bright, the air too sharp. This was no longer just a quiet mystery in the back of his mind. People were searching. By the time Robert returned home, paranoia had fully set in. He pulled the blinds shut. Every passing police car made his breath hitch. He couldn't stop thinking about the words he'd overheard. Security cameras. Investigators. Had they already seen him on tape? Was his face being studied at that very moment? He opened the bag one more time, staring at the neatly stacked bills. What had once seemed like an unexpected stroke of luck now felt like a trap slowly closing in. Robert Withington had never considered himself a criminal. He wasn't the type to make the evening news, much less be the subject of a police investigation. Yet, as he paced his living room that evening, his gut told him something he didn't want to admit. This wasn't going to go away. He turned on the news, half expecting to see his own face staring back at him. Instead, there was just the usual local chatter: construction projects, weather reports, an upcoming town hall meeting. Nothing about the missing money. He exhaled. Maybe it wasn't as serious as he thought. Maybe it really would just disappear. But the thought barely had time to settle before his phone buzzed. A text message. "Hey, Rob. Have you heard about that missing money? Found in a parking lot near the bank? Apparently, it belonged to the town. Big deal, I guess." Robert's heart stopped. It was from an old friend, a guy he hadn't spoken to in weeks. Why was he suddenly asking about this? His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He forced himself to type back. "No idea." "What happened?" The response came quickly. Someone from the town's tax department was making a deposit. Dropped a bag with nearly $5,000 in it. Someone picked it up and vanished. Cops are checking cameras. Cops are checking cameras. Robert set the phone down slowly, his fingers suddenly ice cold. They were closing in. That night, every sound outside his house felt amplified. A car door slamming down the street made him jolt. A passing siren made his pulse spike. He tried to eat dinner but had no appetite. The weight of the bag in the other room was unbearable. His mind spiraled. What should he do? Returning it wasn't an option, not now. That would look suspicious. Maybe he could lie, say he just found it. Maybe he could destroy the evidence, burn the bag, stash the cash somewhere safe. But deep down, he knew it was too late. The town wanted its money back. The police wanted answers. And Robert Withington? He was running out of time. Just past 9 p.m., as Robert was pouring himself a stiff drink to calm his nerves, there was a knock. His breath caught in his throat. He placed the glass down carefully, his hands trembling. Who would be visiting him this late? The knock came again, firmer this time. For a brief, wild moment, he considered not answering. But that would only make things worse. Taking a deep breath, he moved toward the door, every step feeling heavier than the last. His fingers hovered over the doorknob. Slowly, he turned it and pulled the door open. On the other side, standing under the porch light, was a police officer. And in that moment, Robert knew the walls had finally closed in. Robert Withington's stomach churned as he stood face to face with the officer on his porch. The officer wasn't hostile, nor did he immediately pull out handcuffs. Instead, he gave Robert a polite but firm nod. "Evening, Mr. Withington. Sorry to bother you so late, but we're looking into a missing property case, and we're wondering if you might have seen anything." Robert swallowed, trying to keep his face neutral. "Missing property," he repeated, feigning confusion. The officer pulled out a small notepad. "Yeah, a bag was lost near the parking lot outside the bank a couple of days ago. Almost $5,000 in town tax funds. Belonged to the tax department. We're talking to a few people in the area, just seeing if anyone happened to notice something." The moment stretched painfully. Robert could feel the heat rising up his neck. This was it. The test. He forced himself to shake his head. "No, I didn't see anything." The officer tilted his head slightly, as if measuring Robert's reaction. "You sure?" "We checked security footage. Someone picked it up." Robert's mouth went dry. His brain scrambled for an answer, for some way out. He could deny, but would that work? Had the cameras caught his face, his truck, his clothes? The officer was still watching him. A bead of sweat slid down Robert's back. Then, almost casually, the officer closed his notepad. If you do remember anything, give us a call, okay? Robert nodded stiffly. Of course. The officer lingered a moment longer, then gave a curt nod. Have a good night. And just like that, he was gone. Robert exhaled shakily, shutting the door behind him. His hands were shaking. That had been too close. Way too close. They knew someone had taken it. They were looking. And if they had security footage, it was only a matter of time. The next morning, Robert could barely function. He paced the house, his thoughts tangled in knots. He had two options: get rid of the money, destroy the evidence, maybe even leave it somewhere anonymously. Come clean. Admit everything before it got worse. But neither option felt safe. If he tried to return it, they'd know it was him. If he got caught disposing of it, he'd look guilty. He was trapped. By afternoon, the paranoia had reached its peak. Every time his phone buzzed, he flinched. Every car that slowed down in front of his house made his stomach twist. And then the news broke. Trumbull police had officially announced that they had a suspect. They had reviewed footage. They had gathered evidence. And they would soon be making an arrest. Robert turned off the TV, his breath coming in short gasps. The noose was tightening. His time had run out. Robert Withington sat in his dimly lit living room, the weight of the past few days pressing on him like an iron cage. The bag of cash still sat where he had left it, untouched since his encounter with the officer. The walls seemed to close in, his thoughts spiraling into one inescapable conclusion. They knew. The news report had been clear. An arrest was imminent. They had footage. They had evidence. And deep down, Robert knew he was the suspect. He had two choices. Wait for the police to come and arrest him. Turn himself in and try to control the narrative. For a man who had spent his life staying out of trouble, the second option seemed less terrifying than the first. If he waited, they'd storm his house, cuff him, and drag him through town as a thief. But if he walked in on his own terms, maybe, just maybe, he could salvage something. As the sun began to set, Robert made his choice. He grabbed the bag and held it for a long moment, staring at it as if it were the source of all his problems. In a way, it was. What had seemed like a stroke of luck had turned into a curse. With a deep breath, he got in his truck and drove. The police station wasn't far, but it felt like the longest drive of his life. His hands were clammy on the steering wheel, his pulse hammering with every turn. When he pulled into the parking lot, he sat there for a long moment, gripping the bag, gathering the courage to step inside. Then, finally, he pushed the door open and walked in. The front desk officer looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" Robert swallowed hard. "Yeah, I think you're looking for me." He placed the bag on the counter. "I found this in the parking lot a few days ago. I should have turned it in, but I didn't. I want to make it right." The officer's eyes widened slightly. He pressed a button on his radio. Within moments, two detectives stepped into the room. One of them, Detective Harris, crossed his arms. "You're Robert Withington, right?" Robert nodded, his throat dry. The detective exhaled sharply, as if this was exactly what he had been expecting. "Why don't you come with us?" Robert spent hours in an interrogation room explaining his side of the story. He told them everything: how he had found the bag, how he had convinced himself it was just lost money, how he had panicked when he realized the truth. The detectives listened, took notes, asked questions. Then they handed him a charge sheet. Third-degree larceny. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, no handcuffs, no dramatic arrest. But it was real. He would have to go to court. He would have to explain himself to a judge. His stomach twisted at the thought of his name in the local papers, the whispers from neighbors, the damage to his reputation. But deep down, he knew this was the price of his decision. In the weeks that followed, the town buzzed with the news. Some people called him a thief. Others said he had just made a dumb mistake. But in the end, Robert agreed to make full restitution, returning the money in full and cooperating with authorities. Because of this, the charges were dropped. He was lucky. He hadn't gone to jail. He hadn't lost everything. But he had learned a lesson he would never forget. Some money isn't meant to be yours. As he walked out of the courthouse, free but forever changed, Robert Withington knew one thing for sure. If he ever saw another bag of cash lying in a parking lot, he'd leave it right where it was.